Hello, everyone. Today we'll learn about the second category of Muktzeh Mechamat Chesron Kis, which means that it's Muktzeh because of fear of losing a valuable item. We mentioned in the past the knife for shechita and for circumcision, slaughtering and circumcision, but some of these other examples here are a lot more practical, and so. Let's delve into it. Valuable items that have no use on Shabbat and that people always take care not to move except for the specific purpose for which they are designed to ensure the items do not get damaged or lost are Muktzeh Mechamat Chesron Kis. For example, knives designed for ritual slaughter or for leatherworking are Muktzeh. Even if one wants to cut his food with them, he may not pick them up and use them instead of a different knife because of that idea that it might get nicked or even lost or misplaced, etc. So before we continue, there was a story in the Talmud about this woman, Miriam bat Bilga. She was from the Bilga priestly family, and she kicked the altar in the Beit HaMikdash. So this was during the Second Temple, where it still was standing. A lot of Jews were already being influenced by the Hellenistic practices, and so she used the word that is in Greek and Latin, as far as I know. Lupus, lupus means wolf, wolf. Until when are you going to consume the property of the people of Israel? And so, before we go into what the punishment was, it's weird or scary that Jacob himself, in the blessing to Binyamin, where the altar was standing in the property of Binyamin, like we talked about a few weeks ago, was also said Binyamin Zevitraf, which means that Benjamin is like a devouring wolf who will consume the sheep of Israel. But when Jacob blessed it, and this is the difference, when Jacob blessed Benjamin with this, it was actually a blessing because he was basically telling him the altar will be in your nachala, in your inheritance, but not, God forbid, that there's something wrong with the mizbeach, the altar having sacrifices on it. And this woman, Miriam, kicked it, and so that disgust action is what is the difference between the two. And so, like I said, Binyamin Zevitraf literally means Benjamin will be like a wolf that devours, but she kicked it, and so the punishment that the Pharisees or the other Kohanim, I'm not sure exactly who, did for her family, not to her, because she's not a Kohen, so she cannot be properly punished for that action, was that instead of people carrying the knife to the altar in order to do the slaughtering right by the altar and then bring the sheep or goat or cow up onto the altar through the ramp, they instead locked them with chains, and so they could not take their knives closer to the altar. They had to stay, connected to the knives, and so the knives really truly were muktzeh, which means that they could not be used for anything else. They couldn't by mistake, take them home or anything like that. And so it's just a amazing historical fact about the knife for shechita, for slaughtering. Included in this category of muktzeh are musical instruments, smartphones, radios, tape recorders, expensive or fragile music players, cameras, and mixers. These may not be used even for a permissible purpose, for example, as a paperweight. So if you remember yesterday, we learned about Muktzeh Mechamat Gufo, and even rocks and stuff like that. And the rabbis would say it's better that you take a rock, even if it wasn't pre-designated before Shabbat for that purpose as a paperweight, as opposed to these Muktzeh Mechamat Chesron Kis who were a lot more stringent with it because we don't use them with such a mundane use of a paperweight, but that's a great example because it shows us how high the level of this prohibition is. Similarly, one may not wrap himself in an expensive piece of fabric that has been set aside for sewing. In contrast, a valuable or fragile item that is frequently used on Shabbat, such as a gold watch, eyeglasses or a magnifying glass for reading is not Muktzeh. Other examples of Muktzeh Mechamat Chesron Kis are paper money, important business documents, identity cards, credit cards, stamps, bus tickets, parchment to be used by a scribe, and stationery paper that is not used for any other purpose. And just so you could understand how severe, again, this is, on Chol HaMoed, we're not allowed to handle parchment and write the Torah on Chol HaMoed. So the days, the intermediary days between one Yom Tov and the next. Wall clocks and valuable pictures, which people are careful not to move so as to avoid possible damage, are included in this category of Muktzeh. Also included are large freestanding closets that people are careful not to move without a good reason, for fear that they will fall apart, or what we call a showcase or vitrina in French, where we keep our silver and stuff like that. You're allowed to open the door of the cabinet to remove the silver for Kiddush, etc., but you're not allowed to move the actual cabinet on Shabbat because, again, it might get damaged. Especially in moving, people usually wrap them around with blankets so that when they're in the truck, even if the truck goes on a bump or whatever, speed bump, they will not be shattered. And the prohibition here is limited to moving the entire closet. One may open its doors and drawers as they are meant to be used regularly. So in Shani's mother's home, besides the Kiddush cup and stuff like that, there's also the benchers are in one of the drawers, and challah covers is another one, and so that's why we are allowed to do that. Cups, plates, and clothes that are meant to be sold are Muktzeh Mechamat Chesron Kis. So if you already decided that you're going to sell your fine china, that is not allowed to be used even for the regular purpose of a meal, because you already set it aside to be sold. You don't want people to realize or recognize that there was some kind of use that was not proper, or staining it, since sellers usually insist that no one use them. If a seller does not insist upon this, his wares are not muktzeh. So if the family decides that we're going to have a garage sale on Sunday, they're still allowed to use those plates and utensils on Shabbat, because the sale will only be on Sunday, and obviously they're going to wash it in between on Motzei Shabbos. People who sell food generally do not insist that no one eat from their merchandise, and therefore the food in stores and warehouses is not muktzeh, even though there might be a loss, but because workers are allowed to eat a certain amount of food, and also the boss for sure, that is why it is like that. And so we had a pretty short class today, but we'll open up for questions.